Greetings everyone, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, here to bring you another episode review from Season 6 of The Loud House. Today's episode is titled Cheer Pressure. First we'll discuss the plot, and then my thoughts and critiques with my final score. So, let's get right into it. In this episode, the middle school cheer squad challenged Lynn, Margot, and Paula to a cheer-off after Lynn and her team accused them of not being real athletes. The basketball players go through some training with the help of Cheryl and Meryl, and although they pull off a good routine, the actual cheerleaders put on a much better one. The episode ends with Lynn apologizing for her earlier criticism, and neither one of them loses the bet on having to ride in the cattle trailer while on the road to school sporting events, which is something I'll touch upon in just a little bit. Well, that concludes the plot of the episode, so now we come to my thoughts and critiques. Before I start, I want to quickly bring up something I thought I'd never see on the show. Lynn is finally seen wearing something that doesn't resemble pants whatsoever. For once, she's wearing a skirt, and for a girl who usually displays a rough and tough attitude, that's the last thing you'd ever expect her to wear. Now that that's out of the way, let's get on with the actual review. This has got to be one of the most unique sports episodes of the series. We've seen episodes where Lynn partakes in a lot of mainstream sports, including soccer, baseball, football, and basketball. This time, however, the main sport of the episode was cheerleading. It's something we've rarely seen following the episode Hand-Me-Downer back in Season 1, so I can appreciate characters such as the middle school cheer squad making their first appearance in the series and doing so with a purpose. Speaking of whom, the dynamic between them and Lynn's basketball team is quite interesting because, objectively speaking, neither one of them is wrong in their respective definitions of what they consider a real athlete. When you do some online research, the question of whether a cheerleader can be considered an athlete or if cheerleading is an actual sport is somewhat debatable and not 100% consistent across the board. Some organizations say it is a sport and some say it's not. Some say cheerleaders are not generally considered athletes according to the definition of any officially recognized sport, and some say cheerleaders are athletes based on the literal definition of the word sport. Going based off the literal definition, a sport is an activity involving physical exertion and skill in which an individual or team compete against another or others. That's true for Lynn's team during basketball season, and Jenna's team partake in year-round cheer competitions, both instances being true in real life. I know this is a lot to take in, but to make it as easy as possible, both basketball players and cheerleaders are, by textbook definition, athletes in real life and on this show, and yet Lynn and Margot discredited the cheerleaders by saying they weren't real athletes because of a common stereotypical mindset. They pretty much said cheerleading is not on the same level as basketball when it comes to the kind of rigorous training they have to go through, which again, they're technically not wrong to say. Still, being a cheerleader does involve some type of physical training, and Lynn and her team found out it's not exactly easy to pull off. That's when Cheryl and Meryl stepped in to train them because they used to be the co-captains of their school cheer squad and were once known as the Split Sisters. I never would have pegged them for the kind of people to be that flexible, but hey, you learn something new from them every time you see them, and this was quite a unique reveal. The sisters trained Lynn and her friends on what it takes to be a cheerleader, which involves strength, spirit, and teamwork. What's interesting about those three pillars to cheerleading is when you really stop and think about it, they can be just as easily applied to basketball. Both teams have to go through some kind of strength training, they need to have the spirit to motivate both themselves to do a good job on the field, and to motivate their spectators so they can feel good about what's going on, and they have to work together as one cohesive unit so everything can come together as smoothly as possible. In other words, what it takes to be a basketball player and a cheerleader is conceptually the same when it comes to the core values Cheryl and Meryl were trying to teach. Of course, it didn't matter how good Lynn and her friends were trained. They may have been able to put on a fairly decent cheer routine for a bunch of rookies, but they were quickly put to shame by Jenna and the rest of the actual cheerleaders. This is where I have to talk about some of my critiques of the episode. While I understood the lesson Lynn ultimately ended up learning, being that cheerleaders are just as tough as basketball players in their own way, her saying Jenna and her friends are the toughest and strongest athletes she knows doesn't really hold up too well given her character history. Besides Lynn never once bringing up the fact she's played multiple sports in the past and is always strength training, which would legitimately make her tougher and stronger than any cheerleader in terms of fitness and endurance, she and her friends never put the same amount of time and training into cheerleading the same way Jenna and her friends did. Assuming the episode began on a Monday, they only had until the upcoming Friday to get a routine together. 1 week of beginner training compared to what I would suspect is maybe a year or more of cheer practice, it shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone that someone like Jenna was going to out-cheer Lynn by literal leaps and bounds because she and her friends have had more time to perfect their craft. For real, they were already demonstrating how talented talented they were even before they decided to hold a cheer off. For Lynn to concede to Jenna's earlier claim about being tougher and stronger than her, given the short time frame the basketball team had to learn just the basics of cheerleading, just seems a little too easy. The same could be said if the episode reversed the roles and had Lynn challenging Jenna to a game of basketball, with the cheerleaders only having less than a week to prepare, and then being shown up by the vastly superior performers because the latter already had more practice time on their side. So yeah, sort of a rush concession on Lynn's part, but I understood and appreciated the lesson being taught. My next critique is right at the end when both Lynn's team and Jenna's team agreed to call off their bet where the winners got to ride on the bus and the losers had to ride in a cattle trailer with a kangaroo. That was because Coach Keck needed room on the bus for her new massage therapist and massage chair. I don't know if it's just me who thinks this, but when you look at the exterior of the bus, it looked like there was easily enough room for everyone and everything. I'm not sure why Keck said she had a massage chair when it was obviously a table, but either way, I don't think it would have been physically possible to fit that thing on the bus without getting rid of some of the seats. I guess it doesn't really matter because she ended up in the cattle trailer while all the kids got to ride inside the bus because of the incredibly convenient conversation Jenna's mom had with Principal Ramirez about the gym teacher misappropriating school funds so she could buy a personal masseuse and a real kangaroo mascot instead of a costume, although Keck claims the latter was just a mix-up. And finally, my last critique is Paula, and I think the reason is very obvious. Even though I will give some credit to how she was able to successfully partake in the cheer routine, the gag with her trying to make it through practice while using her crutch came off as both unfunny and very inconsistent. I was questioning how she was able to put pressure on her broken leg and not react to the pain that would cause. She said she couldn't take a knee during basketball practice, and yet she was able to do a cartwheel and then do the splits. Her cheer routine got me thinking about a little fan theory created by deviant artist Tana Sweet 123. There's a picture that suggests Paula has only been faking a leg injury in order to gain sympathy from others. I don't know how true that is, but this episode certainly lends a lot of credibility to that theory. Personally, I think Paula should have been replaced with Maddie, who strangely enough doesn't appear in this episode even though she's been a stable to all of Lynn's sports teams for the longest time. If Maddie took over Paula's role, the training for the cheer-off wouldn't have looked as silly and contrived as it did with a girl who should have only been using one good leg. At least Lynn and Margot wouldn't have had a hard time trying to lift Maddie the same way Lynn and Paula were trying to lift Margot when they tried to make a pyramid. Again, I get the joke with Paula, but it's one of those jokes that gets really old really fast. Maybe I'm being too critical, but that's just how I see it. Overall, this episode was good, but not that good. The story did a decent job at demonstrating how similar and different the athletics between cheerleading and basketball can be in terms of what it takes to do both, although the latter is not really as touched upon as the former. Lynn learned that cheerleaders have to work just as hard in their activity as she has to work in hers, although for her to admit defeat very quickly after just one beginner's routine just seemed too easy given the limited amount of time she had to prepare in comparison to girls who had been cheerleading for much longer, on top of how past sports episodes would actually prove she is in fact tougher than any cheerleader. Still, everyone learned to respect and appreciate what each of them does in their respective activity, and that was that. Besides my critiques regarding Paula and Coach Keck, the episode is not exactly too memorable for season 6, but it's certainly one of the most unique sports episodes for the entire series. With that said, I give Cheer Pressure a 7.8 out of 10. Well folks, that concludes my review of Cheer Pressure. I will end this review with something I talked about in a previous video. Remember in my review of Crash Course when I said I would like to see Lucy invoke a real working spell on her siblings? She technically did that in this episode when she had Lynn and her friends recite what they thought was a cheer. I know she's not the one who said those words herself, but I would assume she was the one who wrote the words on that scroll. If she can make spooky things happen on a regular day, just imagine what she can do on Halloween. Once again, that's something I would like to see before the end of the series, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, as far as the rest of the episode goes, what did you guys think of it? Love it? Hate it? Something you would add? Change? Keep it as it is? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe to this channel for the latest Loud House content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video, but until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices.